Have you ever found yourself explaining your choices to someone who had already decided to misunderstand you? You explain why you walked away. You explain why you became silent. You explain why you changed. You explain why you said no. You explain your intentions, your decisions, your boundaries, your priorities, and somehow, after all those words, you still feel like you have not been understood. This is where you need to stop. Not because you should become cold, not because other people do not matter, and not because communication is useless, but because there is a moment when explanation stops being communication and becomes a desperate attempt to control another person's opinion of you. You cannot control that. No matter how clearly you speak, someone can misunderstand you. No matter how honestly you explain yourself, someone can twist your words. No matter how carefully you live, someone can still judge you. So the question is not, how do I make everyone understand me? The better question is, do I understand myself? Because when you truly understand yourself, you become less dependent on external approval. You begin to realize that your life is not a courtroom where everyone gets to demand evidence for your decisions. You do not need to defend every boundary. You do not need to justify every change. You do not need to convince every person that your intentions are good. Your actions will eventually speak louder than your explanations. There is a quiet strength in becoming comfortable with being misunderstood. You stop chasing people who have already made up their minds. You stop arguing with every opinion. You stop giving endless explanations to people who are not listening. And instead, you return your attention to the only place where it can create real change: yourself, your discipline, your character, your choices, your peace. Today, understand the difference between speaking because something needs to be clarified and speaking because you are afraid someone might judge you. That difference can change the way you live, because sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. You simply continue walking calmly, silently, with complete awareness of who you are and where you are going. One of the greatest forms of inner freedom is realizing that your life does not require everyone's approval. You were not placed on this earth to make every person comfortable with your choices. You were not given your life so that you could spend every moment defending it to others. Yet many people live exactly this way. Before making a decision, they imagine what others will think. After making the decision, they explain it. If someone disagrees, they defend it. If someone misunderstands them, they become anxious. Slowly, without realizing it, they begin living according to the expectations of other people. This is exhausting because approval has no finish line. Today, one person approves of you. Tomorrow, another person criticizes you. You adjust yourself again. Then someone else has another opinion. If your peace depends on everyone being satisfied with you, you will never experience lasting peace. You must learn to ask yourself a different question. Is this decision aligned with my values? Not. Will everyone like it? Not. Will they understand? Not. Will they approve? Your responsibility is to live with awareness and integrity. Listen to wise advice. Consider constructive criticism. Admit when you are wrong. But after you have examined your decision honestly, you must have the courage to stand by it. There will always be people who misunderstand your silence. There will always be people who question your boundaries. There will always be people who think your priorities should be different. Let them think. Their opinion is not automatically your responsibility. Understand that seeking approval can become a subtle form of dependence. When you constantly need others to confirm that you are doing the right thing, you slowly lose contact with your own judgment. Real maturity begins when you can hear an opinion without immediately obeying it. You can respect someone and still disagree with them. You can love someone and still choose a different path. You can listen to someone and still make your own decision. This does not make you selfish. It makes you responsible for your own life. Your life will eventually become the result of the choices you repeatedly make. Therefore, learn to choose consciously. Walk the path you have examined carefully. Accept the consequences of your decisions. And stop demanding that everyone understand the journey you are walking. You do not need permission to become the person you know you are capable of becoming. Sometimes the deepest confidence is simply the ability to say within yourself, I have thought about this carefully. I know why I am doing it. I accept the consequences. Now I will move forward. And then you stop explaining. You live. There is a subtle difference between explaining yourself and defending yourself. One comes from clarity. The other often comes from insecurity. When you constantly explain your choices, you slowly teach yourself that your decisions are not valid until someone else approves them. You may not realize it at first. You simply want to be understood. You want people to know that your intentions were good. You want them to see the situation from your perspective. But when you repeatedly seek understanding from people who have already judged you, something changes inside you. Your attention moves away from your own principles and toward their reactions. You begin asking, what will they think? Then, how can I make them understand? Then, what should I say so they don't misunderstand me? And suddenly, another person's opinion becomes the center of your decision. This weakens your inner authority. A person with inner authority does not need permission to follow what they know is right. They listen to advice, they consider criticism, and they remain open to correction, but they do not surrender their judgment simply because someone disagrees. You must learn to stand behind your decisions without constantly putting them on trial. If you have made a mistake, admit it. There is strength in responsibility. If someone has a valid concern, listen. There is wisdom in humility. But if you have carefully considered your decision and someone simply does not like it, you do not owe them an endless defense. Your energy is limited. Every unnecessary explanation consumes a portion of it. Instead of spending that energy proving yourself, use it to improve yourself. If you say you want discipline, practice discipline. If you say you want peace, protect your peace. If you say you are changing, allow your behavior to demonstrate that change. The strongest form of explanation is often consistent action. People may question you today, but time reveals character. A single conversation can be misunderstood. A pattern of behavior is much harder to distort. So become less interested in convincing and more interested in embodying. You do not need to announce your strength. Develop it. You do not need to repeatedly explain your boundaries. Live them. You do not need to prove your worth. Build a life that reflects it. When you stop depending on other people's approval, you regain something extremely valuable, the ability to move through life according to your own principles. That is not arrogance. That is inner stability. There is a difference between explaining yourself and justifying yourself, and learning that difference can completely change the way you interact with people. Explanation comes from clarity. Justification often comes from insecurity. When someone genuinely wants to understand you, you can communicate. You can explain your perspective, share your reasons, and listen to theirs. This is healthy. It creates understanding. But when you feel that you must repeatedly prove that your decision is acceptable, you are no longer simply communicating. You are seeking permission. You do not need permission to protect your time. You do not need permission to change your priorities. You do not need permission to walk away from situations that repeatedly disturb your peace. Ask yourself before explaining, am I communicating because this person deserves clarity? Or am I explaining because I am afraid of being judged? That question creates awareness. Sometimes you explain because you want to prevent conflict. Sometimes you explain because you want someone to see your good intentions. Sometimes you explain because you cannot tolerate being misunderstood. But the more you depend on other people understanding you, the more power you give them over your emotional state. A mature person learns to communicate without becoming attached to the response. You can speak clearly and still accept that someone may disagree. You can apologize when you are wrong without creating a long defense for your behavior. You can explain your boundary once without turning it into a negotiation. You can say, this is what I have decided, without writing an entire story to convince someone that your decision is reasonable. This is not arrogance. It is self-respect. Remember, clarity does not require endless words. When your actions are aligned with your values, you become less interested in proving yourself. You understand that time reveals character more effectively than explanations ever can. Let your behavior demonstrate your intentions. Let your consistency demonstrate your commitment. Let your boundaries demonstrate your self-respect. And let your silence demonstrate that you are no longer willing to spend your energy convincing people who have no genuine interest in understanding you. You do not have to explain every step of your journey. Sometimes you simply need to walk it. Silence is often misunderstood. People think that if you do not respond, you are weak, afraid, or unable to defend yourself. But true silence can come from a completely different place. It can come from self-control. When you understand yourself, you no longer feel the need to respond to every comment, accusation, or misunderstanding. You realize that not every situation deserves your energy. Not every opinion deserves an answer. Not every person deserves access to your thoughts. This is a form of inner discipline. Imagine someone trying to provoke you. They want you to react because your reaction gives them something to work with. If you become angry, they can continue. If you become defensive, they can question your explanation. If you become emotional, they can pull you deeper into the situation. But when you remain calm, the cycle ends. You have not lost. You have simply refused to participate. This does not mean you should remain silent when something genuinely requires communication. If you have made a mistake, speak. If someone deserves an honest explanation, communicate. If a boundary has been crossed, make your position clear. But once you have communicated what is necessary, stop. Do not keep adding words because you are uncomfortable with someone else's reaction. You might say, "This is my decision," and they might ask, "Why?" You explain. Then they ask another question. You explain again. Then they challenge your explanation. Soon you are no longer communicating. You are defending your right to make your own decision. That is where silence becomes strength. You can hear someone without accepting their judgment. You can respect their opinion without changing your direction. You can allow someone to disagree without turning disagreement into conflict. The deeper lesson is that peace requires boundaries around your attention. Your attention is limited. Your energy is limited. Your time is limited. If you spend all of it proving yourself to other people, you have very little left for becoming the person you want to be. So learn to pause before responding. Ask yourself, does this need an answer? If the answer is no, let silence speak. Sometimes silence says, I have nothing to prove. Sometimes it says, I understand you, but I will not be controlled by your opinion. And sometimes it simply says, my peace is more important than winning this conversation. That is not weakness, that is mastery.